Hi, everybody. Welcome. Hello. Happy Tuesday. We are going live. Hello. Happy Tuesday. We're going live earlier this week on Billable-Hour Burnout. Let's just get into it because we have a lot to go through. I say this every week, but it's always so true. There's so much happening, and I just want to make sure we're using your time the wisest, the most wisely. Uh, so let me welcome you to the show. Firstly, this is our final episode in our boundaries series. We're talking about boundaries. We've been talking about boundaries, but here's the thing. Your lack of boundaries, it's leaving you to work harder. Your lack of boundaries is leaving you feeling a little disrespected. Your lack of boundaries is only making things worse until now. Let me welcome you to the show. Welcome to Billable-Hour Burnout. If you need some helpful tactical advice that actually gives you the career of your dreams without all the stress and overwhelm, you are in the right place. If you want to finally enjoy the life that you've spent decades building, you are in the right place. If you find yourself here today, it means you're ready to have more work-life balance, more ease, more confidence, and you're ready to make it happen without having to quit your job or burn down your life. My name is Lauren Baptiste. I'm your CPA turned life coach, and this is Billable-Hour Burnout. On the show, I share simple, tactical advice and strategies catered specifically to the modern woman in accounting, consulting, and law. You ready? Let's go. Well, you may have seen the news. You may have seen me sharing all of this information, all of these invitations about overwork. I am doing my next webinar next Tuesday, and it's called The 5 Fatal Thoughts That Create Overwork. I'm going to share more about that later, but in case you pop in quickly and you have to pop out even quicker, make sure you register for that. In order to get access, you're going to want to, well, first to join, you need to register. But for whatever reason, if you have a last minute hiccup, because sometimes that happens too, I want to make sure that you are fully registered. We are going to be recording for replay access, so I always like to share that so you know you have all the options, but in order to get all the goods, you have to register. But that being said, let's talk about my real personal anecdote. I am going to the beach this week and I am really excited. I will be staying with family. We have one of my aunt, she has a house only like 3 blocks from the beach. So we will be logging in some days there over the coming weeks. And if any of you know, I'm a Jersey girl. I love the Jersey Shore. So I'll be enjoying my time down the shore because the last few weeks I've been spending so much time inside. And if you're from the Northeast, you know what I mean. Muggy, humid, gross weather. I'm done. So that being said, clear skies ahead for the next few days, and I can't wait to get my toes in the sand. Let's dive into our client success story. This week is a shout out to one of my clients, Jackie, and she said, the work I did with Lauren not only provides an understanding of how your mind connects to your actions and the results you want, but also provides some logic and boundaries around understanding that more often than not, the outcomes you desire are in your control. This I thought was the perfect words for today's episode, right? She's talking about how mindset and boundaries and your mind are all related. Now, for some of you who are wondering, this is also related to overworking. When we don't have boundaries, we're leading to more overwork. So, overwork is my theme for the next couple of weeks, but you can hear how boundaries here, or the lack thereof, means we don't get the results that we want. The lack of boundaries leaves us feeling sometimes high and dry or disrespected or overworking or just feeling undernourished. And that's why we're going to use today's session to talk about the boundaried mindset. Now, if you've ever joined me before, you know I talk about 2 things: tactics and mindset. This is it. Tactics are great. Knowing the boundary tactics are amazing, but they don't create the boundaries unless we have a boundary mindset. This is why this was the last episode intentionally in this mini series talking about boundaries. We talked about the 10 areas a boundary is needed. We talked about the secret to communicating a boundary. We talked about setting and upholding boundaries. And today, the boundary mindset. So when we think of a boundary mindset, what does that mean? I want you to take a moment and be like, what is a boundaried mindset? It's a mindset that enforces the boundary that you want to create. Now, I've been talking for the past 4 weeks, and if you watch me on YouTube or Instagram, you see me make this same gesture of creating a fence, creating a boundary. I use my hands a lot. This is my Italian American growing up heritage speaking right here. But if we are thinking of this as the fence, the boundary mindset is like the electricity for the electric fence. It like makes sure that no matter what, it's like enforced, or it's that iron lock that like locks the fence in so nothing can penetrate. When you have a boundary mindset, you can start to become aware of the thoughts that you're having that are getting in the way of your boundaries. You can start to think about and acknowledge the feelings that come up when we talk about boundaries versus avoiding them. We can then take intentional actions to make them real versus actions for action's sake. So let's go deeper because I want you to really feel this. When you have boundaried mindset, you only then do you have healthy boundaries. So let's go deeper. Let's take a normal circumstance where we don't have a boundary. Maybe one of the reasons why we don't have a boundary is we think if I have one, it won't be respected. Now, if I think that, if I believe that if I have a boundary, it'll never be respected, then really how I'm going to feel is probably resentful, especially when it is not respected. I'm going to feel a little uncomfortable because I don't even feel confident in my own boundary that if I enforce it, no one else is going to respect it, right? So I start to feel resentful. I start to feel uncomfortable. And then what happens is my actions come in. I start to feel shut down. I don't communicate well to my team, letting them know that a boundary was crossed. I then focus more of my time and effort on quitting my job versus working things out in my current job. That's maybe all good otherwise, except for this one boundary. So what can happen is if you feel like your boundary will never be respected, or if you think that, then you're going to continue to feel disrespected and trapped. And guess what? Your boundary is not going to be enforced. Here's another example, right? I want you to really feel this. I want you to see this. Another thing that clients often say to me is that boundaries are hard. Enforcing a boundary is hard. So then if I think that, then I'm going to start to feel pretty disempowered when the idea of actually enforcing, creating, maintaining a boundary, right? I'll start to feel disempowered. I'll start to feel like it's opportunistic and not realistic. And then what happens in my actions is that then I maybe half do it, right? Like maybe I tell somebody what my boundary is, or I put up an out of office message, but then when somebody sends me a calendar invite, I still accept the invite, right? The result that it leads to is that nothing changes if we believe that boundaries are truly hard. I want you to see and notice these negative thoughts are then creating these feelings that we have: anger, resentment, frustration, desire to quit my job, right? All of this builds because of these thoughts. And then what happens is nothing changes. So when we're talking about boundaries, we need to be thinking of a mindset that's going to help it stick. For example, let's try this. Lauren taught me over the past 4 weeks techniques that I can use. I can use these tools to move closer to my ideal work situation, right? So the thought is I can use the tools I've learned to move closer to my ideal work situation. That doesn't mean it's perfect. That doesn't mean the boundaries are perfectly enforced. It doesn't mean that you're fully respected. It just means you have the tools. Now, when you have the tools, it leaves you from a place of feeling resentful, uncomfortable, disrespected, disempowered, to hopeful, determined, right? If you're saying, all right, I have the tools, I just need to learn how to use them. Now you move from a place of disempowered to empowered. That leads into actions like communicating when your team books time on your calendar and you say, hey, listen, I want to be there. And right, we mentioned the problem and a solution. This isn't going to work for me, but let's try to talk through what can work, right? We communicate proactively with our team. We come up with solutions. We practice the tools. We evaluate on how we're doing. We get help if we notice that this is hard. I remember when I went on my flexible work arrangement and I went part-time, I noticed how challenging it was to actually maintain the boundary. I thought, well, if I'm on a flexible work arrangement, everyone's going to respect that I work less hours. No, they respected working less hours when I stopped working all day on the days that I was working. I went from 15-hour days to make up from to a shortened week, right? I was working maybe like, let's say a 40-hour week, which was never the case. But if I was spreading my hours to 8 hours a day, I then crunched 40 hours into 3 days, working like 14, 15-hour days. That's not a flexible work arrangement. That's just working a lot in a very short period of time. I had to then break that mold and talk to my team and say, listen, this isn't working. Here's what needs to happen. I need to move off of a few of these clients because I'm on a reduced working schedule. I'm not going to be able to juggle A, B, and C. I can only juggle A and C. Who can help me with letter B, right? And what results in this is progress. I don't want to promise you perfection. I don't want to promise you that you're going to have every boundary that you've ever wished for completely fulfilled. On day one, that's not likely at all. But when you have the tools and you feel hopeful, you then move 1 inch closer, one step forward. You then feel more available to raise your hand to get the help that you need. When we think about boundaries, I have a few questions, right? A boundaried mindset specifically. I have a few questions I want you to think about. Let's start with this. What is the boundary that you want to achieve? We thought about this in the last session of setting and upholding boundaries was like, what's the boundary you want? I really want you to get clear with what you may have to feel to hit your ideal boundary. If your boundary is that you're not going to work past 3 o'clock on summer Fridays because your company tells you can leave on summer Fridays, but for some reason your whole team keeps working till 5 p.m., what will you have to feel to uphold the standard of your summer Friday? You may have to feel guilty. You may have to feel uncomfortable. You may have to feel like lonely because everyone's working and you're going to leave. You may have to feel a whole host of emotions. It's not just joyful, excited, boundaried, empowered, confident. No. The reason why we don't have boundaries is because we feel uncomfortable, whether it's based on our people pleasing or our perfectionism coming in, but we often feel like we don't want to do it at the expense of someone else. Well, I don't want someone else to be upset at me. I don't want someone else to have to do the work because I need to go pick up my kids from daycare at 6 p.m., right? I've used that example throughout this series. You might have to feel discomfort. And are you willing to move through that? This is why a lot of clients come to me because they're usually not willing to move through that. They bounce up against that wall of discomfort and then they ricochet back because they don't have the tools to navigate the boundaried mindset and the tactics together. But I really want you to think about this. What might I have to feel? It may be a feeling that I don't like to get to where I want to go. What actions, right? Second question, will you need to take to achieve that new boundary? What might you have to do? We've talked about first being really aware of what the situations are where boundaries are often needed. Then we talked about small boundaries, hard boundaries, and soft boundaries. We talked about the boundaries that we must absolutely have. We talked about lots of different ways to think about the boundaries of even how to communicate it. We even walked through examples. Think about what you might need to do. Who do you have to talk to? What needs to be said? How do you uphold it, maintain it? Do you evaluate? Do you tweak and repeat like we talked about? Think about all of the different tactics that were offered and then see with which one you can start with. And then when you do this, right, I know what I'm willing to feel uncomfortable to take my summer Friday boundary. I'm going to communicate it with my team. I'm going to put up my out of office. I'm going to tell my client if needed, right? Is that needed when you're leaving 2 hours early? Maybe, maybe not. What actions might you need to stop doing? If you said you're going to leave at 3 and everyone says, go enjoy, get off your email. Don't log into that Zoom call. Stay away, right? Because then otherwise you're creating an expectation when she's out, she's still available. When she's not in the office, we can just grab her anytime we need. And that then bleeds into the nights and the weekends if you're not careful. So when you create that, right, when we're creating the boundaried mindset, so we're aware of what we're going to feel. It's going to feel a little cringy and uncomfortable to say, I'm leaving at 3 today, guys, even though I have other things to do, but I'm going to do it on Monday. Right. And then I'm going to do all the things I said to on my checklist to make sure I enforce my boundary, and then really be mindful of the things that you need to stop doing. Stop people pleasing, stop overworking. Right. And I teach you all how to do that on my upcoming webinar. Stop focusing on the right now. Think about the big picture. That being said, what might you need to think to move closer to that healthy boundary? Now, this is why we have these fatal thoughts that always keep creeping up. But when we're thinking about boundaries, there are helpful thoughts that help move you closer to what you want. I love the one that I offered today because there's this idea I can use these tools to move closer to my ideal situation. It's very tangible. It's very practical. It's very realistic within a certain time frame, right? Another optimistic thought you can try here is I'm going to experiment on my boundaries for the next month and a half. And I'm going to use the month of end of August and all of September to practice one boundary, right? That's my thought. I'm going to practice. And then when we practice, it allows us to actually learn, experiment. We come in this place of curiosity instead of expectation. It works. It works. And that's why the result I like to say is progress towards the boundary we want, but absolutely building the muscle of a boundaried mindset. All right, that is today's conversation. So as we recap boundaries in its whole, boundaries, they're for you. They're not for anybody else. They are for you. If they're important to you, you got to make them happen. Communication as it relates to boundaries is critical for establishing and maintaining healthy boundaries. Communicating with your family, communicating with your colleagues, even communicating with yourself, right? It's key for establishing and maintaining a healthy boundary. Let's be really intentional about the boundaries you create. And remember that it takes time. The boundaries that you're setting aren't your colleagues. So it takes time for them to get used to your new boundary. It's not just about you. It takes time. And so we want to be intentional about how we do it. And setting boundaries is a process. Be patient with yourself. Get the support you need. This is the work why so many clients come to me, because they know the boundaries they want, but they aren't sure how to instill them after 10 years of working a completely different way. They're used to being the go-to gal. You're used to being on call on the weekends. They're used to it, and their teams are used to it. So we have to break that pattern. And that's why I want to invite you to join me next Tuesday, this upcoming Tuesday, the 20th of August at 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to be going through this in so much more detail. It's called the 5 Fatal Thoughts That Create Overwork. In this webinar, you're going to learn the 5 thoughts that are creating the overwork. You're going to want to know them. My guess is you already know them and you use them on the daily, but we want to get really clear and aware of what they are because it's costing you so much in your life. and it's way more than just your billable hours. It's costing you a lot. So you're going to learn what it's costing you. And then I'm going to give you new thoughts to try on. I'm going to give you thoughts that are going to help create a life where you don't need to overwork. It's one thing to work hard. We all work hard. It's another thing to work more than you need to. And that's what we're talking about in next Tuesday's webinar. So in the comments of this, I will include the link for you to register. I highly encourage that you register ASAP, grab your spot, lock it in, throw it on your calendar, and throw away the key, right? Join me. It's going to be this might be one of my best webinars. I'm really excited for this, and I know that you're going to get a ton of value from it. That's the end of today's episode. If you have questions, drop and let me know, whether it's about the Boundaries series, whether it's about the upcoming webinar, whether it's about me, my program Freedom, Akaloa Wellness, any of the things. You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, really wherever you hang. I want to hear what's working. I want to know what you think the fatal thoughts are. I want to know all of the things. So send me a message and we'll stay in touch. That's the best way. I love staying in connection with this community. But thank you so much for listening. Another episode. Episode 22, complete. If you want more information about me, Lauren Baptiste, Akaloa Wellness, or anything else, visit my website, www.akaloawellness.com. I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday's webinar. Let's create the mindset where we can have our boundaries, where we stop overworking, where we start loving our life. It's so available for you. You just have to decide. All right, see you next week.